Imagine living hours, maybe even days, just in the blink of an eye.
Or the opposite, right? Stretching a few short seconds out.
Exactly, into this huge expanse of experience.
Yeah.
What if the time on your watch isn't quite so fixed?
Yeah, not as rigid as we tend to assume it is.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into something fascinating. Time distortion in hypnosis.
Uh-huh. How the human mind can basically bend and reshape its experience of how long things feel like they're taking.
Allowing for these, well, seemingly impossible mental feats, really.
And our main source for this is a truly groundbreaking book.
Right. Time Distortion in Hypnosis, an experimental and clinical investigation.
By Dr. Linn Cooper and the very well-known Dr. Milton Erickson.
And this isn't just like theoretical musing, is it? It's based on actual experiments, actual clinical work.
Oh, absolutely. Empirical studies, real-world applications from, the mid-20th century, conducted between 1948 and 54.
Yeah, but the findings still feel incredibly relevant today.
They definitely still resonate. Cooper and Erickson actually saw it as exploratory trips into a strange land, which I think is a great description.
That's perfect. So our mission really is to unpack this. Understand the science, see how they investigated it.
And look at the applications, which are genuinely surprising things, like learning, creativity.
Psychotherapy, too. We want you to get a handle on how subjective time, our felt sense of time, can be so profoundly different from the clock.
And maybe what that tells us about consciousness itself.
Okay, let's break this down. To really get it, we first need to define what time distortion actually means in this context.
Right. The authors make a really crucial distinction between two kinds of time.
Which are?
Well, first you have experiential time. That's just how long an event seems to last for you. It's seeming duration, they call it.
Okay, so how long it feels.
Exactly. And then you have clock time, which is, the actual measured duration by a watch. World time, physical time.
Got it. Felt time versus watch time.
That's the fundamental difference. And
Yeah.
normally, these two things line up pretty closely.
Right, if I watch a 30-minute show, it feels roughly like 30 minutes past.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
But the time distortion happens when there's a marked difference, a really big gap between that seeming duration and what the clock actually says.
So your internal sense of time is just way off from the stopwatch.
Way off. Drastically out of proportion.
Is there like an everyday example of this? Something we might already know that gives us a hint of this?
Oh, definitely. Think about nocturnal dreams. When you're asleep,
Okay.
you can have these incredibly vivid, complex dreams, right? Feels like it goes on for hours, maybe a whole day sometimes.
Yeah, I've had those.
And then you wake up, look at the clock, and realize maybe only 5 or 10 minutes actually passed.
Ah, right. So that's a natural kind of time distortion?
Exactly. It's a naturally occurring form of, hallucinatory phenomena, basically. A vivid experience that feels real without external stimulus. And it often shows this time distortion.
Okay, so the basic idea isn't totally alien to us. Our minds already do this sometimes.
Precisely. So while the hypnotic stuff is perhaps more extreme or directed, the underlying concept is there in our regular experience.
That makes sense. It gives us a good starting point. All right, so let's get into how Cooper and Erickson actually, investigated this, put it to the test.
Yeah, their work, again, between 1948 and 1954 was really pioneering. They were compiling both experimental data and clinical findings.
And who were the people involved? The subjects?
They were actually quite diverse. Housewives, students, teachers, secretaries, just, regular people.
Not just psychology students or anything?
No. And it's important to remember, the ability to really achieve this kind of time distortion wasn't instant for everyone. It varied.
How so?
Well, it sometimes took anywhere from, say, 3 to 20 hours of training in hypnosis to get proficient. So it wasn't a quick party trick. It required learning and practice for the subjects.
Okay, so what was the basic method they used in these experiments?
Their core approach was pretty consistent. They'd assign tasks to the hypnotized subjects.
Right.
And then they'd carefully study the relationship between how long the subject felt the task took, the seeming duration, and the actual clock reading.
And a key detail you mentioned earlier, the subjects didn't move.
Correct. Critically, they remained completely motionless physically. Their actual body stayed still. It was only their hallucinatory physical body, the one in their mind, that was doing the activity.
Wow, okay. And how did they guide this? Through the hypnotic suggestions?
Absolutely crucial. They used activity instructions, either general or specific, telling the subject what to imagine doing.
And crucially,
Crucially, they always included no hurry suggestions. Things like, you will have all the time you need, or don't hurry, take your time.
Setting the stage for the time experience to be flexible.
Exactly. And here's the vital part. The experimenters never told the subjects how much actual clock time they had.
So the internal experience was totally cut off from external clock reality.
Completely decoupled, which allowed the mind to, stretch or compress time without interference.
So what did they find? Were the results as dramatic as the concept sounds?
Oh, the results were, frankly, astounding. Just incredible.
Give us an example.
Okay, take the automobile ride experiment. One subject experienced what felt like a full half-hour car ride.
A half hour.
Yep. She reported all sorts of details, counting cows, looking at license plates, even stopping for lemonade from a little girl with pigtails she hallucinated.
So a very vivid, detailed scene.
Extremely. And all of this unfolded in, wait for it, 10 seconds of actual clock time.
10 seconds? Seriously?
10 seconds. The subject was lying there motionless, but afterwards, she reported the activity seemed like a half hour easy and felt very real.
That's just mind-bending. A half hour and 10 seconds.
And they noted that the little detail about the lemonade, this coincidental happening, really added weight to her report. It wasn't just vague imagination. It felt like a lived sequence of events.
Incredible time expansion. What else? Were there other examples like that?
Oh, yes. Another really compelling one involved cotton-picking tasks. Might sound mundane, but the results weren't.
Okay.
In one task, a subject mentally picked 719 cotton balls. This took 217 seconds of clock time, so a few minutes. But subjectively,
How long did it feel?
it felt like 1 hour and 20 minutes to her.
Wow.
Then, in a separate task, same subject, she picked 862 bowls. Clock time for this. Just 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
3 seconds. But how long did it feel to her? Also, 1 hour and 20 minutes.
The same subjective duration, despite the huge difference in clock time.
Exactly. It shows this inherent tendency for time distortion. The mind seems capable of generating these incredibly detailed, coherent realities in just moments.
It really blurs the line between just imagining something and actually, experiencing it internally.
That's a key insight. It points to this immense processing power in our subconscious, operating at a totally different rate from our normal conscious awareness.
Were there even more extreme cases mentioned?
There were. One subject apparently counted 9,200 BB shot pellets, one by one. Even took imaginary swimming breaks.
And the clock time.
5 seconds.
5 seconds. That's unbelievable.
It really pushes the boundaries. Others took imagined long walks, went on dates, prepared lectures, stuff that would normally take half an hour to several hours, all in just 10 seconds of actual time.
So they're creating these incredibly rich internal worlds. But how did Cooper and Erickson probe the reality of these worlds for the subject? Did they just rely on the reports afterwards?
That's a great question. They actually innovated here by sort of injecting reality into these hallucinated experiences.
How did they do that?
They introduced external sound signals while the subject was in the trance, experiencing their hallucinated world. Things like striking a damped glass or sounding a pitch instrument. Simple sounds.
Okay, so they'd play a sound in the room while the person was off on their 10-second long walk? What happened then? What was remarkable was how often the subjects didn't just ignore the sound or get jolted out of it. They actually seamlessly integrated these sounds into their imagined world.
They fit them into the hallucination.
Yeah. The sounds acquired a context that made sense within the hallucinated scene. For example, a sound might become the sizzling of lead if they imagined a pot tipping over, or a telephone ringing during an imagined task, or even like an auto horn getting stuck during that imagined car ride.
So the mind just wove it in naturally.
Right. And here's the real kicker.
Uh-huh.
The perceived duration of those injected sounds was also distorted. A brief sound signal might seem to last much longer within the hallucinated time frame.
So that further confirmed the subjective time was really stretched out.
Exactly. It wasn't just a story told afterwards. The real-time processing of external stimuli was also warped to fit the subjective time frame.
That's compelling evidence. Did they have other ways of demonstrating this control over perceived time?
Yes. The metronome experiment is another classic. They had a subject listen to a metronome ticking once every second. Pretty standard.
Okay.
But then they gave the suggestion that the metronome was slowing down, gradually getting slower and slower.
And what did the subject report?
She eventually reported that it had slowed down so much it was only making 1 stroke per minute.
Whoa. So she was experiencing minute long gaps between ticks that were actually happening every second.
Precisely. It vividly showed how, as the authors put it, experiential time was actually given to the hypnotized subject by means of suggestion. It wasn't just perception, it was like her whole temporal reality was being reshaped by the suggestion.
The conviction of these subjects really stands out. You mentioned they felt very real. They insisted on the realness, the continuity.
Absolutely. They often expressed emotions you'd expect from a real experience, enjoyment, sometimes even boredom if the task was repetitive, just like in real life.
But still, the skeptic might ask, couldn't they just be making it up afterwards, elaborating, maybe unintentionally? How did the researchers address that?
That's where these coincidental happenings come in again. These spontaneous, unexpected details that popped up in the hallucinations.
Like the lemonade stand girl.
Exactly. Or another subject losing an oarlock while imagining rowing a boat. Or someone tripping over an imagined curb to avoid an imagined car. Or even cutting a finger while making imagined sandwiches.
Things you wouldn't necessarily think to invent.
Right. These unprompted, sometimes slightly inconvenient details, Cooper and Erickson argued, speak against retrospective falsification. It makes it less likely they were just spinning a yarn after the fact to please the experimenters.
That makes sense. Did they ever compare these hypnotic hallucinations directly to, say, regular night dreams?
They did, with 5 subjects, and the comparison was quite telling.
How so? What did the subjects say?
The consensus was that the hypnotic hallucinations felt better organized, more real, and they even called them directed dreams.
Directed dreams!
Yeah. They felt they were conscious of what you were doing and can control the situation better during the hypnosis. Unlike regular dreams, which they often described as silly and impossible, and having less continuity.
So, more coherent and controllable than a typical dream.
Exactly. Which again suggests these experiences are something more than just free-form imagination or typical dreaming. And while the polygraph tests they did were limited by the technology of the time, they generally indicated the subjects were being truthful. They were reporting their experiences as they knew them. If there were gaps in the reports, it seemed to be more about lack of attention to certain details, not deliberate lying.
Okay, so the subjective reality felt authentic. But did these experiences ever lead to, like, actual real-world results beyond just the experience itself?
Yes, and this is where it gets even more fascinating. There's the case of Subject K. She had a real-life problem figuring out how to finance building a house.
Okay, a practical issue.
In a trance, she was guided to discuss this problem with hallucinated friends she conjured up in her mind.
Right.
She reported receiving very good advice from these hallucinated friends, advice she then actually implemented in the real world.
And did it work?
Yes. She successfully completed the house project and credited the solution directly to that very real hallucinated conversation.
Wow. Getting actionable advice from an internal hallucinated discussion, that's remarkable.
Isn't it? It shows real problem solving happening within this altered state.
What about other applications like memory?
Also some intriguing findings there. One subject was a pianist through hallucinatory practice in hypnosis.
Practicing piano just in her head?
Yes. She apparently recovered lost skill in playing a piece she had learned years before but couldn't play well anymore. Other subjects managed to relive forgotten childhood details or scenes from play rehearsals, which were later verified as accurate.
So accessing seemingly lost information or skills.
Exactly. The takeaway here is the mind's incredible power, not just to create these internal realities, but for those realities to feel incredibly solid, impactful, and even useful, leading to tangible benefits.
It really does hint at this massive untapped potential within our own minds.
It really does. Which naturally leads to the question.
So what does this all mean, especially for practical fields like therapy?
Well, the implications for psychotherapy were seen almost right away. It seemed to offer this potential, well, almost a shortcut.
A shortcut? How so?
A way to potentially understand and maybe even reorder a patient's experiential life much more quickly than traditional methods. It opened up a whole new potential frontier for therapy.
That sounds pretty radical. Can you give us a concrete example of how this was used clinically?
Sure. Take the case they call Patient A. He was an artist. For over 10 years, he'd been completely blocked, unable to paint a specific circus picture he wanted to create.
A decade-long creative block. That's rough.
Very. So after receiving hypnotic suggestions designed to facilitate this, he, subjectively, in his mind, painted the entire complex oil painting, dealt with specific technical challenges like mixing subtle blue shades he'd struggled with, and this entire creative process.
How long did it take in clock time? Don't tell me.
Mere seconds.
Seconds. To paint a whole picture mentally.
Yes. And when he woke up, the block was gone. He went on to actually paint the picture physically, and it was critically acclaimed.
That's incredible. He essentially compressed potentially hours or days of creative work and struggle into seconds of subjective time.
Exactly. It's a stunning example of using distorted time for highly focused, productive mental activity, in this case, creativity.
Amazing. What about for dealing with, say, deeper psychological issues, like trauma?
Patient B is a really profound case here. This was a woman suffering from recurrent hysterical amnesia. Basically, she'd have episodes where she'd lose large chunks of her memory, often related to trauma.
And traditional therapy wasn't working?
No, it had failed for months. So they tried time distortion. A single 20-second session.
20 seconds. What was the suggestion?
Simply, from childhood to now remember.
And the result?
It triggered this incredibly rapid chronological outpouring of traumatic memories. She narrated events, experiences, feelings for many hours continuously.
All stemming from that 20-second suggestion.
Yes, and this massive recall and processing led to a significant and, importantly, a lasting therapeutic breakthrough for her. Her amnesia resolved.
That is truly astonishing. How do you think that worked? How could 20 seconds unlock hours of repressed memory?
It seems that when the mind is freed from the constraints of clock time, and perhaps also from conscious defenses and resistance,
Right.
it can process and integrate information at a vastly accelerated rate. For patient B, maybe the speed allowed her to see connections and patterns in her experiences that she couldn't access consciously or piece together slowly.
And Cooper and Erickson were confident these were lasting changes, not just temporary effects of the hypnosis.
Their clinical approach involved careful follow-up. They reported observing continued well-being and symptom reduction over time, suggesting the changes were integrated and stable.
Okay. And it wasn't just for these major breakthroughs, right? You mentioned skill learning, too.
Yes, patient C provides a great example of that. He was a student struggling with his singing and musical instrument playing, performance anxiety, maybe skill issues. He learned to induce very brief trances himself, just 10 to 30 seconds long, during breaks at his regular job.
Quick self-hypnosis breaks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in those few seconds of clock time, he experienced what felt like at least 3 long as well as several brief practice sessions per night.
Practicing music entirely in his head for subjective hours during a thumb-second break.
That's what he reported.
Yeah.
And the result, his actual real-world musical performance dramatically improved. So much so, it led to increased income from his music.
That's like a mental superpower for practice.
It really is. He even reported hallucinating a tape recording of his practice sessions so he could mentally review them later.
That's taking mental rehearsal to a whole new level. So if I could learn this, maybe I could finally get through my reading list in what feels like minutes.
Well, maybe not for all kinds of tasks, as we'll see. But it certainly suggests incredible potential for speeding up certain kinds of mental work and skill refinement.
What about therapy where the patient is resistant? Like they don't want to talk about the problem.
Patient D is relevant here. This person wanted quick therapy but actively refused to discuss the actual problem troubling them.
A common challenge in therapy.
Indeed. So Erickson used a 20-second time distortion suggestion focused around the single word blood, which seemed connected to the underlying issue.
Just the word blood.
Yes. Apparently this caused some initial physical distress in the patient, but it led to a deep, unconscious understanding and resolution of her problem.
Unconscious, so she didn't consciously figure it out.
No. Her conscious mind was actually protected by amnesia for the experience. She just felt better afterwards, the problem resolved, without consciously knowing why or how. It shows the potential to address deep issues, bypassing conscious resistance.
So we've seen time expansion being used. Did they also use the opposite, time condensation, making time feel shorter?
Yes, absolutely. And that had therapeutic uses too.
Like what?
Think about dental work. Nobody enjoys that. One patient, while at the dentist, was guided to experience a full afternoon on the lawn as she remembered being a little girl.
So she mentally escaped the dentist chair.
Completely. She was dissociated, lost in this pleasant childhood memory. The actual dental work took an hour of clock time.
But for her,
it seemed to pass in an instant. She experienced subjective time condensation, making an unpleasant hour feel like no time at all.
That has obvious applications for pain or discomfort management.
Definitely. And they used a related idea for headache management. One patient was taught, when she had a headache, to focus on it and experience it as lasting a long 60 whole seconds, or even an unendurably long, painfully long 90 seconds.
Making it feel longer subjectively, that seems counterintuitive.
It does, but think about it. Her actual headaches might last, say, a few minutes, by subjectively stretching those minutes into what felt like an eternity.
She kind of got it over with faster in her own mind.
That seems to be the idea. By exaggerating its subjective duration, she gained a sense of control and could manage the symptoms better. It felt like she'd endured it for ages, even if only minutes passed.
Interesting twist. So what's the key mechanism here? What allows this utilization of time, as they called it?
The crucial factor, they stressed, is that the subject needs to be totally unaware of his surroundings and of world time. That complete detachment from external reality seems essential for the mind to fully engage in this subjective time manipulation.
Okay, detachment is key, but you hinted earlier it doesn't work for everything. Was there a specific type of task where time distortion didn't help?
Yes, and this is a really important finding. Mathematical problem solving.
Math problems didn't get faster.
No, subjects didn't show improvement in solving math problems within distorted time, unlike the creative tasks or memory recall or skill practice.
Why the difference? What was their explanation?
They suggested it's because tasks like math aren't primarily constructed from elements of past experience or new combinations thereof.
Ah, so the things that did speed up, like painting, recalling memories, practicing music, they all draw heavily on existing knowledge, memories, skills, recombining them in new ways.
Exactly. Whereas logical, sequential problem-solving like math might rely on a different kind of processing that isn't accelerated in the same way by this subjective time expansion.
That's a fascinating limitation. It shows it's not just a universal brain speed up. It's specific to certain kinds of mental activity.
Right. It tells us something about how different cognitive functions might operate relative to subjective time.
These incredible findings didn't just suggest new therapies, they also pushed Cooper and Erickson to think more deeply about how the mind works. Right? Concepts like meaning tone.
Yes, they delved into some more foundational ideas to try and understand how this was all possible. Meaning tone is one of those concepts.
Okay, what is meaning tone?
It's essentially the feeling, the understanding, the whole constellation of nonverbal experiences and memories that get attached to words or concepts.
So not just the dictionary definition.
Not at all. It's rooted in your personal past experience. Think about the word home. It's not just a building. It evokes feelings, maybe smells, images, a sense of safety or belonging. That's the meaning tone.
Ah, okay. The felt sense associated with a word, based on everything it connects to in your experience.
Precisely. And Cooper and Erickson argued that hypnotic suggestions work so powerfully because they tap into these deep, often nonverbal experiential links.
So how does that relate to making hallucinations feel real?
Well, they particularly point to the power of the verb to be. When a suggestion states something like this is an apple, it strongly activates the meaning tone associated with existence, with reality, based on all your prior nonverbal experiences of things being real.
So the simple affirmation is links the suggested idea directly to your fundamental sense of reality.
That's the idea. It makes the suggested hallucination feel very real, because the language connects directly to that bedrock of felt lived experience. It bypasses intellectual analysis and hits that experiential level.
And this creation process, they emphasized, isn't like consciously trying to imagine something.
No, for well-trained subjects, it was described as a spontaneous and effortless production of fantasy or reality. Quite different from the deliberate effort usually involved in waking imagination.
More like it just happens, unfolds.
Exactly. And again, going back to truthfulness, the polygraph data they had, limited as it was, generally supported that subjects were honestly reporting their subjective reality.
They weren't lying about what they experienced.
Right. Gaps in reports seemed more about attention or lack of personal ideas to flesh out a detail rather than deliberate falsification. They were describing the experience as they perceived it.
And this led them to even deeper philosophical territory, didn't it? Something about the ego-non-ego relation.
Yes, that's touching on some pretty profound stuff about consciousness and reality.
What's the core idea there?
It's sort of the notion that both the physical world out there and our subjective world inside are ultimately forms of experience, patterns of experience. And changing patterns in one domain, like directing your thoughts, an internal subjective change isn't fundamentally different, in a way, from changing patterns in the other domain, like, say, physically moving an object.
So, blurring the line between internal mental acts and external physical acts.
In a philosophical sense, yes.
Hmm.
If you connect this to the bigger picture of their work, it strongly suggests that our perception of reality, maybe even our sense of self, is much more fluid, much more internally constructed than we usually assume.
Hmm. That if our internal experience of something as fundamental as time can be so radically altered.
Then maybe the boundary between ourself and the world, or between mind and matter, isn't quite as solid as we think.
It really makes you question the nature of subjective experience and its relationship to the objective world.
Deeply thought-provoking stuff. It suggests consciousness is far more malleable, far more capable of shaping its own reality than conventional views might allow.
So, wrapping this up, we've really journeyed into an amazing area today. Time distortion in hypnosis from the solid experimental proof
Seeing how people could genuinely experience hours and seconds,
to its really quite profound clinical applications. Enhancing learning, unlocking creativity.
even processing deep psychological trauma at an accelerated rate, all happening within the subjective landscape of the mind.
I think the key takeaway, for me at least, is that time, the way we experience it, isn't this fixed, absolute thing like a clock.
Not at all. It's a malleable construct within our own consciousness. This research really highlights an incredible and mostly untapped capacity of the human mind, the ability to generate and manipulate reality internally.
Which opens up so many exciting possibilities, not just for therapy, but for understanding how our minds work, maybe even improving how they function in everyday life.
Absolutely. It challenges our basic assumptions about time and mind.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering how powerful our perception of time is, how might a deeper understanding and maybe even application of experiential time change things, not just therapy, but daily life?
It's a great question. If you could, say, expand a few minutes into what felt like an hour for really deep concentration on a project,
Or conversely, condense a really boring way, like standing in line, into what feels like just an instant. What would you choose to do with that ability?
and how might that change your personal productivity, your learning, maybe even just your general well-being day to day?
Something definitely worth thinking about.